You grew up with a key around your neck, made your own after-school snacks, and learned to solve your own problems because your parents were at work until 6 p.m. No helicopter parenting, no participation trophies, just you, a TV with 4 channels, and the unspoken rule: figure it out yourself. If you're nodding right now, congratulations, you're Gen X, the generation everyone forgot about. And psychologically, that might be exactly why you turned out so well adjusted. Here's what's fascinating about Gen X psychology. Born between 1965 and 1980, you're sandwiched between two of the loudest generations in history, boomers and millennials, and somehow you just quietly got on with it. Psychologists call this the latchkey generation effect. Research from Dr. Jean Twenger's work on generational differences found that Gen X developed what's called functional independence earlier than any generation before or since. You weren't neglected, you were trusted, and that trust built something in your brain that's actually pretty remarkable. While millennials were given structure and Gen Z gets therapy speak from TikTok, you got something different: benign neglect. And before you think that sounds bad, here's what psychologists discovered. Children who experienced appropriate independence between ages 8-14 developed stronger problem-solving skills, better emotional regulation, and higher resilience to stress in adulthood. Your parents weren't hovering because they were working, so you learned to navigate the world without a safety net. And your brain adapted. Here's what happened psychologically when you came home to an empty house at age 10. Your brain had to develop executive function earlier. Making your own snack wasn't just about food, it was about planning, decision-making, and delayed gratification. You had to think, do I eat everything now, or save something for later? You learned emotional self-regulation without a parent mediating every conflict. Got in a fight with a friend, you had to figure out how to fix it yourself, because mom wasn't scheduling a playdate intervention. Research in developmental psychology shows that children who experience controlled independence develop what's called an internal locus of control, the belief that you control your own outcomes. This is directly correlated with lower anxiety, higher career satisfaction, and better stress management in adulthood. You weren't abandoned, you were inoculated against helplessness. Let's talk about why Gen X is so cynical. Because psychologically, your skepticism isn't pessimism, it's pattern recognition. You grew up watching corporations downsize your parents despite decades of loyalty. You saw the first recession, the dot-com bubble, the housing crash, the pandemic. You've been through 5 once-in-a-lifetime economic crises. But here's what psychologists found. This created what's called realistic optimism. You hope for the best but prepare for the worst. Studies show this mindset is actually healthier than blind optimism or pure pessimism. You're not jaded, you're calibrated. You've seen enough to know that nothing is guaranteed, so you don't build your identity around external validation. And that makes you psychologically flexible in a way younger generations struggle with. When millennials get crushed by a layoff, it can feel identity destroying. When you get laid off, you update your resume and move on. Not because you don't care, because you never expected loyalty from institutions in the first place. Your generational catchphrase, whatever isn't apathy. Psychologically, it's something much more sophisticated: radical acceptance. Dr. Stephen Hayes' research on acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, describes this exact mindset: acknowledging reality without excessive emotional reactivity, then taking action anyway. Gen X was doing ACT before it had a name. You don't waste energy fighting things you can't control. You don't perform outrage on social media. You observe, assess, and decide if something is worth your limited time and energy. If not, whatever. This isn't disengagement, it's psychological efficiency. Research shows people with this mindset have lower cortisol levels, better sleep, and longer life expectancy. You're not checked out, you're conserving your resources for things that actually matter. While other generations are exhausting themselves with constant emotional labor over things they can't change, you're gardening, fixing your car, and actually living your life. Here's something that makes Gen X psychologically unique. You don't perform your life for an audience. No generation before or after you has been so comfortable with privacy. You don't post every meal, every thought, every achievement. Millennials document everything for validation. Gen Z performs identity for TikTok. You just exist. Psychologically, this is protective. Research on social media and mental health consistently shows that performing your life increases anxiety, depression, and disconnection from authentic self. You never developed that habit because social media didn't exist until you were already adults with established identities. You know who you are without an audience. And that's increasingly rare. Your sense of self isn't dependent on likes, shares, or viral moments. It's internal, stable, unshakable, by algorithmic approval. This is why Gen X has lower rates of social media-induced anxiety than younger generations. You engaged with social media as adults, not as identity-forming teenagers. Your brain was already wired before the dopamine slot machine of notifications existed. Being ignored by culture has a psychological upside: freedom. While boomers and millennials fight for attention, and Gen Z demands to be heard, you've been quietly building lives without the pressure of generational spotlights. No one's writing think pieces about what Gen X wants. No brands are desperately trying to decode you. And psychologically, this lack of attention created something valuable: autonomy. You're not performing for cultural relevance. You're not trying to prove generational worth. You just live.